Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Racha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Job, the 31st chapter. And this is Job continuing to speak. as it says here, right? He asserts his integrity. I made a covenant with mine eyes. Why then should I think upon a maid? All right, which is to say that here he basically lists out things that he stayed away from, right? These are like, if he's guilty of any of this, let the Lord bring consequences and judgments upon him, right? So as he says, he made a covenant with his eyes not to lust, right, after, a young woman, right, or after a woman. For what portion of God is there from above, and what inheritance of the Almighty from on high? Is not destruction to the wicked, and a strange punishment to the workers of iniquity? Right, so what does the Lord give, right? What portion does he give? What inheritance does he give? Is it not destruction to those that are wicked? And as it says, strange punishment, which when you go into the Hebrew, that strange is like misfortune to the workers of iniquity. Doth not he see my ways and count all my steps? So isn't he aware of my doings, right? Isn't he, count all my steps, which is like to track your goings, right? Your things that you do and so on. If I have walked with vanity, or if my foot hath hasted to deceit. Okay, so meaning that if he kept any company or walked in the ways of vanity, which when you go into that word, right, it's also falsehood, right? So Job is saying here, if he did any of those things, right, or if his foot hasted to deceit, that is, to make haste to do things deceitfully or wickedly, let me be weighed in an even balance, that God may know mine integrity, right? So he's like, weigh my actions in a balance and see, between right and wrong, if I've been, more wicked in my life. If my step hath turned out of the way, and mine heart walked after mine eyes, right? So if I deviated from the path of the Lord, for the path of righteousness, or if my mind went after the lusting of my eyes, and if any blot have cleaved to my hands, right? Any guilt or iniquity has your hands is like your power, right? Your actions. Then let me sow and let another eat. So he's saying, if I've been guilty of any form of sin, then let me work for another, right? Let me sow and let another eat. Yea, let my offspring be rooted out. Which when you read that, you have offspring, which are also your children, but here with the context of the preceding sentence, it sounds like it's more in reference to like crops, right? As he's speaking about sowing and another eating and rooting out. So in the NIV it says, or actually NKJV, then let me sow and another eat. Yes, let my harvest be rooted out. If mine heart have been deceived by a woman, or if I have laid wait at my neighbor's door, that is him going into he's basically saying, if I've been guilty of adultery, right? So that laying wait, or being deceived, in this case seduced, right? Laying wait by a neighbor's door, it's like an ancient way of referring to, it's not like you coming to visit, but you are lurking about, basically in the sense of trying to, deal with the whoever it is, his wife, right? It's another way of referring to adultery, as the 10th verse also, the punishment of the 10th verse sort of gives you the context of the 9th, right? Because he refers to how let him sow and let another eat when he talks about the crops. And here he's saying, basically, if I've been seduced by a woman, or if I've been guilty of adultery, then let my wife, as it says, grind onto another, and let others bow down upon her, right? Meaning let her become another's, right? Let others, let somebody else, deal with her, like as if I dealt with another man's wife. NIV, it says, then may my wife grind another man's grain, which there's one sense of it, which is like, when you're actually using the millstone to grind, which is like serving or working, for another. But also you have grind in the sense of a euphemism for having sexual relations with another. It says, and may another man sleep with her. That's what goes into that bowing down on her or over her. So basically, if I've dealt with somebody else's wife, let somebody else take my wife. Is what he's saying. For this is a heinous crime. Yea, it is an iniquity to be punished by the judges. For it is a fire that consumeth to destruction, and would root out all mine increase. Right. So he's saying this is a sin that would strip me of everything. Right. It's a very, as he mentioned, heinous crime. If I did despise the counsel of my manservant or of my maidservant when they contended with me, what then shall I do when God riseth up? So he's saying if any of his servants brought up an issue to him and he just, unjustly or unfairly just dismissed it, what is he going to do when the Most High rises up against him? And when he visiteth, what shall I answer him? Did not he that made me in the womb make him, that is the servant? And did not one fashion us in the womb? Right. So it's saying if the Lord was to, make inquisition against you concerning these, what would you say? Because is it not the same God that made both you and that servant? Did you not both come from a womb that you're mistreating them? If I have withheld the poor from their desire, or have closed, or Slakia caused the eyes of the widow to fail. NLT says, have I refused to help the poor or crushed the hopes of the widows? In the NIV, it says, if I have denied the treasures of the poor, Salakia, the desires of the poor, or let the eyes of the widow grow weary, meaning you had the ability to help them, but you didn't. Or have eaten my morsel myself, which is his bread or his food, myself alone, and and the fatherless hath not eaten thereof. So you see somebody that is, like it says, the fatherless, they're less fortunate, they're hungry, they're more in need, but you're eating your food right then and there, and they've not eaten. And he's saying, like, these are things that he wouldn't do, right? For from my youth, he was brought up with me as with a father, and I have guided her from my mother's womb. He's speaking generally about the fatherless and the widow and his treating to them. So in the NLT it says, no, from childhood I have cared for orphans like a father, and all my life I have cared for widows. If I have seen any perish for want of clothing, or any poor without covering, if his loins have not blessed me, and if he were not warmed with the fleece of my sheep. So basically, if I saw anybody that was wanting or lacking clothing or covering, and I didn't help them out or warm them up, give them something to, to wear or cover. If I have lifted up my hand against the fatherless when I saw my help in the gate, right? If I have basically raised my hand against the fatherless, knowing that I have when he says saw my help in the gate, meaning like I know I have the backing of the other elders in the gate and so on. So basically abusing your power. Then let mine arm fall from my shoulder blade, and mine arm be broken from the bone. For destruction from God was a terror to me, and by reason of his highness I could not endure. It says in the NIV, for I dreaded destruction from God, and for fear of his splendor I could not do such things. So he's saying I feared God, right? I didn't do these wicked things. If I have made gold my hope, or have said to the fine gold, thou art my confidence. So if I put my trust in gold rather than the Lord, if I rejoiced because my wealth was great, and because mine hand had gotten much, if I beheld the sun when it shined, or the moon walking in brightness, and my heart or my mind hath been secretly enticed, or my mouth hath kissed my hand, which he's saying here, if I beheld the sun and the moon and I was enticed to worship it like the heathens do, all right, or the ungodly do, because you're only supposed to worship the Lord. But he's saying here, if that's the case, when he says, my mouth hath kissed my hand, that's a figure of speech for basically bowing, right, or like reverencing the ordinances in the heavens, which you're not supposed to. Well, or as though they were like some power to be worshipped. This also were an iniquity to be punished by the judge, for I have denied the God that is above, right? If he did that, if he ended up doing that, it would be an iniquity because he would be denying the Most High. If I rejoiced at the destruction of him that hated me, or lifted up myself when evil found him, neither have I suffered my mouth to sin by wishing a curse to his soul. So he's saying here, I didn't, even for my enemies, I didn't, wish evil upon them, okay, or rejoice when they were, when bad things happened to them. If the men of my tabernacle said not, oh, that we had of his flesh, we cannot be satisfied. NLT, it says, my servants have never said he let others go hungry. Or the NIV, if those of my household have never said, who has been filled with Job's meat? Okay, basically accusing him of being stingy and not as I mentioned, them going hungry, not like providing, all right, enough for them. The stranger did not lodge in the street, but I opened my doors to the traveler. If I covered my transgressions as Adam, by hiding mine iniquity in my bosom. So he's saying here, like, if I sinned and covered it up, right, like how, our forefather Adam did, as he says, by hiding it, mine iniquity in my bosom, meaning to keep it secret, to keep it hidden. Did I fear a great multitude, or did the contempt of families terrify me, that I kept silence and went not out of the door? And let's read this here in the NLT. Says, have I feared the crowd or the contempt of the masses, so that I kept quiet and stayed indoors? Oh, that one would hear me. Behold, my desire is that the Almighty would answer me, and that mine adversary had written a book. So he's here saying, like, I'm putting my case out there, right? But he's like, I don't want answers from man, because they're just, from his friends and those that are around, they're not, at least in Job's perspective, sensible for him. NLT, if only someone would listen to me. Look, I will sign my name to my defense. Let the Almighty answer me. Let my accuser write out the charges against me. Surely I would take it upon my shoulder and bind it as a crown on to me. I would declare unto him the number of my steps. As a prince, I would go near unto him. So it says here, NLT, I would face the accusation proudly. I would wear it like a crown. Verse 37 in the NLT as well, it says, for I would tell him exactly what I have done, and I would come before him like a prince. If my land cry against me, or that the furrows likewise thereof complain, if I have eaten the fruits thereof without money, or have caused the owners thereof to lose their life, let thistles grow instead of wheat, and cockle instead of barley. The words of Job are ended. So he's saying, if I've done wrong, right, against the land, if I've done wrong against others to take their land, at the expense of their life, then, let me suffer loss, right? Let thistles grow instead of wheat, which is that, like, when I plant, let me not have success in any harvest, and cockle instead of barley. And that brings us to the end of the book of Job, the 31st chapter. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Racha Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.